All right, welcome back. I believe this is episode 7 in our series of presentations. And I'm really happy to always lean on Mark to do presentations with me. And I'm just really blown away by this program and the work Mark is doing. I spent my teenage years getting in a lot of trouble. So being friends with the police is something very new to me over the past, I don't know, it's getting close to 10 years, Mark, that we've known each
Yeah,
other. 7.
Yep.
Um,
Late
but
night.
yeah. And so one of the things of Mark's program that I absolutely love is the mixture of, it's kind of, this whole idea is Mark's baby, but it's also super multidisciplinary. You've got social workers, police, school teachers, RTOs, and all of that. So if you're calling in from outside the Australian context, there's probably a lot to take away that you can think of how to adapt that to your work. And so I just want to also, as we begin, that many of us work outside, and when we're outside, we're also traveling and playing on what was originally probably someone else's lands. And so I'd like to acknowledge that the rich histories of the First Nation peoples from all over the world, and that often we can get in a rut of using their land for our own benefit. And so really acknowledging our human and nature kinship, and that a lot of times the places that we go have rich histories that we might not know about, which I believe Mark will talk a bit about. And with that, Mark, I'm going to pass over to you. So take it away.
Thanks, Will. Thank you for that introduction, and thanks for the invitation. I really appreciate it. Always like to talk about this stuff. Anyone who knows me knows that it is just my driving passion. So I'm in the very fortunate position of having my passion to be my work and get paid for it. It's indeed a privilege. As Will said, we're all on different lands, and those lands have a rich history. I'm talking to you from Bundaberg in Queensland, Australia. I really love the fact that every time I use the word or say the name of my hometown, Bundaberg, I'm using Tarabulung language, because Bunda is the Tarabulung word for people. Berg is, depending on who you talk to, it's either German for mountain or Old English for place. And so I'm talking to you from a place that literally means place or a mountain where people gather, which is why they called it Bundaberg. There is a hill just outside here called the Hummock. It's an old extinct volcano, slab volcano, and Aboriginal people would regularly meet there and camp there because it gave such a viewpoint from a high point over this Bundaberg area, which is quite flat apart from that one isolated hill. So I just want to start by acknowledging, not in any sort of superficial way, but in a respectful way, that I live in a really cool place with a really cool history. And I reference that history every time I say I'm from Bundaberg. And I speak a language that was the language of the traditional owners of this land. So I think it's pretty awesome. So just to introduce myself further, I'm a senior constable of police. I've been in the police quite a long time. And I just want to talk to you about how I got from, briefly from the academy to running, an adventure therapy program, or I've never really been able to characterize what my program is. As Will said before, I tend to tick all of the above whenever I do a multi-choice question. And when I came to put a program together, I jammed everything I could into it that I thought was praiseworthy or a good report. This is Steph Gilmore, probably the best surfer in the world, certainly one of the top 5. And I put her up there, one, because I like surfing, but if you can't be a shining example like Steph Gilmore, you can be a horrible warning, which my surfing someone resembles. So I want to spend the first maybe 5 or 10 minutes just telling you how I came to get through, it's 23 years of policing now, how I came to get through the first 15 or so years, because it might serve as either an example or a warning to you. So I started in the police in 1999. I spent 3 years in general duties, just working uniform first response. And then at the end of 2002, just very beginning of 2003, I went into child protection, and I'm never left it. My current position is still in the Child Protection Investigation Unit. Although we've had a name change, it started as a Juvenile Aid Bureau when I started. And in that 12 years of being in child protection, I worked mainly as a detective in child abuse. Spent a bit of time in property squad and drug squad, but child abuse and child protection was really, I made my life's work, suited me, really enjoyed it. I worked mainly in Cairns, which is in the far north of Queensland. And in Cairns, we covered the Cape York region. So the Cape York region of Australia is sort of the pointy bit on the top right of Australia. When you see Australia on a map, it's a very remote area of the country. There are very few bitumen roads up that way. You would drive for 8-10 hours on dirt roads. And most of the communities up there are Indigenous communities, sort of a carryover from missions. Most of them originally had a name that were given to them from the missionaries, where they were placed on, if you think America, reservations, I guess there's a parallel to be drawn there. But many of them have gone back to their more traditional names for names of their area. So places like Arakoon, Kownyama, Pombrea, Lockhart River, Hobart, Wudjil, Yarrabah. So I worked around that place. And really for 10 years, I always thought I had the best job in the world. Got given a full drive that didn't belong to me, that I was able to bash around the Cape with and go to remote areas and met some incredibly interesting people. Went fishing for barramundi a lot. It was a tremendous job. And then obviously there was the child abuse element as well. So I investigated a lot of child abuse up there and in Cairns itself. Did a lot of, went through first response to a lot of natural disasters, Cyclone Yari and Cyclone Yazi, which are the last two category 4 and 5 cyclones that hit the Queensland coast. Abigail, Monica, Steve. I came down to Bundaberg in 2011, helped out with the Bundaberg flood evacuation when most of the town was flooded in 2013, helped out with the Brockhampton floods in 2017, evacuated people in front of the line of bushfires that came through in 2019, just north of Bundaberg. So a lot of disaster response, a lot of major investigations, investigations like murders, rapes, child abuse, child deaths, stalkings, torture, serious assaults, Commonwealth offences, overseas offences. You kind of get the idea. So I've had that sort of that's basically my background. Like I said, I always say for 10 years it was the best job I ever had, being a detective, but I did it for about 12 and a half. For the last 2, some switch flicked within me, and I went from best job in the world to worst job in the world. And so I started, and it was child deaths that really did that. Later diagnosed with post-traumatic stress. At the time, completely clueless as to what that is or what it was. Just thought as I go along, I was having weird panic attacks and nightmares, and having visions that my children weren't breathing anymore, and all sorts of things that in hindsight, I look back at it and it was so clear what I was going through. At the time, it was like, this is a big mystery and nobody knows what I'm going through. But I guess when it came through to about probably 2011, 2013, had a particularly bad child death. I guess I've done 20 or 30 of them, but there was one that really just finished me off, just due to a combination of circumstances, which I won't go into. And from then on, I realized that I was no longer emotionally suited to child protection work. Yes, child deaths, no. Can still do child abuse jobs. Even as my current role, I will do the odd child abuse matter, but I dead kids I just can't handle anymore. It's just something in my brain that has just I go into a panic every time I encounter that sort of thing. So that sort of sets the scene to where I was at. I wound up with a police officer who was an experienced detective. 13 years is a long time in child abuse. Most people sort of burn out after 4 or 5 years. There tends to be a fairly high turnover. So very experienced detective, knew the child protection system inside and out. I guess had a fair idea of what trauma does to a child, because I had interviewed hundreds of kids and listened to their stories about how they've been physically or sexually abused or neglected in other ways. And you can't help but listen to hundreds and hundreds of stories from these kids, and then also got to know them enough to see their behavior and got some sort of an idea of that there must be some sort of cause and effect happening here. So I had all that knowledge, and I thought, well, what a waste of 13 years, because I can't use that knowledge anymore. I just can't be a detective anymore. And then I went into becoming a school-based police officer. So that came as a bit of a surprise to me. Never thought I've got into, I kind of like this slide because it kind of expressed how I felt at the time. In hindsight, absolutely the worst response to post-traumatic stress I could possibly come up with. But I ended up talking to, well, two things happened really in that year. One is I finally got off my ass and went and spoke to somebody about it. And I happened to be a social worker. About a year before, I'd spoken to a psychologist about everything that was going on with me. And she said, oh, well, what are you going to do about it? And I said, well, I'm trying to find a new job. And she goes, oh, well, that sounds like a positive, proactive thing for you to do. I hope you do it. And off she went. This is a psychologist paid for by the police. She went off and I never saw her again. And I never got a job that I was going for, which I thought would be my way out of this situation, and promptly fell into a big black hole. So as a result, it took me a long time to trust psychologists again. But towards the end of that same year, there was a social worker that was employed by the police. And I walked up and down the hall outside her office 3 or 4 times before we got the courage to walk in, sat down with her and spoke for like an hour and a half about what was happening. And she was tremendous and she helped me work through it and gave me a lot of things. So in this week of social work, I just want to say that I think social workers are awesome, because it was really a social worker that really helped me put my brain back together when it was a scrambled egg. And it was a psychologist that shrugged their shoulders and said, sounds like you've got a plan. I'll leave you to it. I'll never see it again. So thanks a lot, psychology.
It is Social Sciences Week, so we are being inclusive of psychologists and social workers. That's just bad practice, Mark. We're not crapping on anybody,
Yes,
okay?
indeed. Oh, look, in fairness, I later met a psychologist because the social worker referred me to one who diagnosed me with post-traumatic stress, explained to me what post-traumatic stress was, and that psychologist was awesome. So yes, it was a specific thing, but I still harbor a bit of a grudge against that for psychologists. That's just me. All right, so here I go. I've got all these skills, how to put them to use in a different way. I knew that there was a position coming up as a school-based police officer, and that never occurred to me before to try that out. But the school-based police officer at the time wanted to become a detective. And so I knew their position was going to come vacant. And I thought, well, I'm a detective who wants something else. Maybe we'll just job swap with each other. So I went and I said, what do you actually do all day? And she said, why don't you come to the school with me and find out? So I went around the school and saw how this lady spoke to people and programs that she ran and education practices that she would go through, teaching in classrooms. Sometimes she would talk to kids in her office. And I thought, this could really be something. Maybe I can use these skills more proactively rather than just reacting to something bad's happened, detective, can you come and investigate? And so I met with the principal, said, look, I've got a lot of outdoor rec skills from my own personal interests, as well as from work around Cape York, a remote area. I'm very comfortable in remote areas and camping and hiking, and met a lot of traditional owners up there who sort of furthered my knowledge about the bush. Could I put together a program, as a school-based police officer, put together a program like this? And the principal said, absolutely. And so I went there, and I guess that was in 2015. I've been a school-based police officer ever since, running this program. So I guess I want to get to that and explain that program, and rather than sort of babbling on, I wanted to show you a quick video. So to do that, I'm going to get Will I'll stop sharing. And Will, if you want to show that little 1-minute video on the Workplace Development Award.
Yep. Just give me 1 second.
Now, do I need to stop sharing so that you can get it? Or can you
All good.
override me?
Oh, 1 second. I did something. Okay. We can see this. I'll make it full. Can you see it, Mark?
No, I'm still seeing my my screen.
Okay. I think everybody else can see it because you're on the screen.
Right.
Yeah. And just make sure you have sound. Oh, what did I do, Will?
So while
we had sound, and then it disappeared. I think we're ready now. Okay.
The Acquia Workplace Development Award. Queensland Police Service Walk of Life program is a school.
Sorry, 1 second.
I think I might have to stop sharing.
Yeah, go ahead and stop sharing. Sorry.
That way, it'll.
Sorry, people. You'd think
And I
7 go-arounds we'd be better at this. Okay, now you should be able to see it and hear it. Okay, we ready? Try this again, Will. All right, let me know if you have audio too. Oh, Will. Sorry, I have a crack in my screen, so I can't see everything. Here we go. Come on, let's play now. Well. Sorry. This is now embarrassing, Will.
The Acquia Workplace Development Award. Queensland Police Service Walk of Life program is a school-based crime prevention program catering to the Bundaberg area since 2015. It includes vocational training and provides marginalised youth assistance in developing essential life skills. Trained facilitators work with teachers with a view to prepare students for outdoor expeditions of up to 100 kilometres, where they learn a range of skills including budgeting, forward planning, cooking, risk assessment and leadership. Walk for Life operates under an MOU formed by the Queensland Police Service, RTO Paramount Adventure Centre and NGO Wild Projects, and it is one of Australia's most unique adventure-based crime prevention services.
My stepson Lucas just walked by me after all of that technological mucking about, and he just looked at me and shook his head. Back to you, Mark.
All right, cool. Let's go from sharing back again from my current slide. Okay, so that let me get rid of that. Okay, so that's what the program looks like as a rough guide. Basically, it started quite simple, where I would literally just think, I want to take these kids on some sort of experience, like an expedition. And sometimes that would be a canoe trip, sometimes that would be a hike, sometimes it would be an overnight hike, sometimes it would be anything up to 5 days, 100 kilometers. And so I know that if I just sort of got a group of kids and said, let's do that this Friday, it would be a real struggle for them and probably for me as well. So I thought, well, I want to meet with them once a week in the lead up. And I was meeting with them once a week up to 3 months before a trip, and teach them a bunch of skills that would help them. So I'd teach them how to cook, how to dehydrate food, how to pack a bag, some basic first aid, how to navigate, how to use a map and compass, just all your regular skills that would make this expedition successful. And that was really what I now call version 1.0 of the program. And it worked really well, and got some great outcomes. I got in touch with the University of Queensland, who did some evaluations on it, and that was looking good. And thought I'd discovered something new until I met Will and the other folks with the Australian Association of Bush Adventure Therapy, and realized that this is like accepted practice and there's a lot of research behind it. And so then I started downloading all that research like a computer, just learning more about it. Eventually I realized that these kids were getting really good skills through the course of this program, but they didn't have anything they could show for it and go on to maybe use that, say, on a resume or going into the workplace. They, I know they had the skills, they couldn't prove it to a third party. And so I ended up getting training myself to be an outdoor ed instructor, got my certificate for in training and assessment, already had and completed my certificate for in outdoor leadership. And so now, by partnering up with a registered training organization, and this is last year was the first time I did this, and so this is like version 2.0 of the program, I can now do the same thing with these kids, but through an accredited training program, they end up getting a certificate to an outdoor recreation, which has a lot of advantages. One, they have a certificate at the end of it to show to an employer that they've completed this tertiary education. They get 4 QCE points. These are points that go to their certificate of education, which means that they are more likely to stay in school, because it's quite difficult to get QCE points. When kids are lacking QCE points, they either leave school out of discouragement or they get pushed out of school because they're not going to leave with a certificate. So it makes it more likely they'll stay in school, which is a great predictor of crime prevention and child protection. And then I can also keep an eye on their welfare and I guess use some of my child protection skills and also use some feedback informed treatment to see how are you traveling, what can I do in a more holistic way, or if I can't do it, what other organizations can I bring in to respond to your needs. So in a second, Will, just to give you some advanced warning, in about 30 seconds, I'll stop talking. And I want to talk a little about a bunch of the first group of this version 2.0 of the program. So there's a radio interview that was done by the ABC with myself and a lot of these kids. And so I want to have a listen to that. It's not very long, it's only a few minutes. It's particularly important to me that I brought this into my presentation because I'm doing too much talking already. And that the person and the voices we really need to hear is the kids themselves. And, you know, I'm always very dubious about people who say they're doing great work. And then sometimes I've listened to some of the work they do and they go, are the people that you're doing this to feeling the same way about this? So that's why I wanted to bring in this radio interview. You'll hear the voices of the kids. And this is before a trip I did last year up to Cape York. I took them back to Cape York and we went up to the Laura Aboriginal Dance Festival, which was a heck of an experience. So I'm going to show you a radio interview first, which was recorded before the trip to talk about, and you'll hear the kids talking about how they were looking forward to this trip. And then we're going to show you a video that I put together after the trip, and you'll hear the kids talking about their experience and how they felt about it post-trip. So maybe we'll start, Will, if you can, I'll stop sharing my screen. We'll give them the radio interview first.
Yep. Okay. No pressure, Will.
You're supposed to use a tent peg to pull these out.
Senior Constable Mark Cartner rolls out a swag in the classroom.
So the plan is each of us will have a bag and a swag. We'll be walking to the PCYCs.
He's showing students how to set up for camp.
Yeah, we're actually a really lucky bunch of kids. Like, honestly, like, we're going to Cape York, which is on 90% of people's bucket lists. And, like, we're being able to do it at 15, 16 years old.
Jordan Ponton is part of the Walk of Life program. It's led by its founder and school-based police officer, Senior Constable Cartner.
Don't think that that's all you need to bring.
From a police point of view, it's the CPs, Child Protection and Crime Prevention, really. Yeah, just making sure the kids are safe, and if they're not safe, they're getting to a safe place, that they've engaged with their education, they've got good prospects for the future, and yeah, that they are going to be in a better off place than where they started.
Apart from unique experiences of travel, each student can finish this program with a certificate too in outdoor recreation. Henry Langmead.
It's given us qualifications to go into the outdoor rec industry of work, and so we do some pretty cool stuff around food preparation, hiking and navigation, altogether really cool stuff. And on our last trip that we did in week 2, we went around the Gold Coast and south. We explored some cool mountain tracks and all this epic stuff.
For students Logan Jonas and Nellie Petrus Genova, there are plenty of firsts in the Walk of Life.
Well, I've never been camping, so I just thought I'd try it out for fun and see what it's like, because to be honest, the other courses didn't seem that intriguing, interesting, so I just thought I'd take a leap and do something fun.
And next stop is the top of Queensland. How cool is that going to be?
Yeah, it sounds very fun. I've already been to the Wet Sundays, which was really fun for me, so I'm just trying to go further, which is good. So
we're going to be able to go fishing as well, so I guess go see what type of fish are there, do a bit of fishing. Haven't been fishing in a long while, so I guess that's going to be fun to do. I guess just being outdoors, just camping is just going to be a real good experience.
No doubt creating some memories along the way.
Definitely some memories. I've definitely made some new friends that I'd never thought I'd be friends with, and yeah, it's a great experience.
The students leave for the Cape this weekend, and it's set to be a cultural experience.
Yeah, so we're going to go, I guess the highlight of the trip is going to be the Laura Aboriginal Dance Festival. I think it's now the Laura Quinkin Dance Festival. That is going to be an amazing experience. It's probably the longest cultural festival of its kind in Australia. It's where all the communities from all around Cape York, and I worked there for 13 years, they all come together and have a big dance-off to see who's the best dancers. So that's going to be pretty phenomenal. But the rest of it is just the country. I mean, I fell in love with the country when I worked up there, and good people up there. And the opportunity to show them something, it's a unique part of Australia, there's nothing like it. And there's a feeling up there that you can't get anywhere else. And so I thought, well, if I enjoyed it, the kids should enjoy it. Let's take them up there and see if they get the same out of it that I did.
And out of all the fun, Lachlan Walker reckons there could be a career in the outdoors thanks to the Walk of Life.
Oh, well, I've always envied sort of the outdoor sort of stuff and being able to find where you are if you're lost, or just the outdoor tips and stuff. So definitely, probably more of a recreation sort of thing, but definitely a big part of maybe my future.
And it's stories like that Walk of Life sets out to inspire. And the very first steps were taken when Senior Constable Cartner simply wanted a new career challenge.
I was a detective in child abuse for 13 years, and that needed a change, but I enjoyed doing this sort of thing as a volunteer in my spare time. And then went to the school. I never thought about being a school-based police officer, but I went to the school when the previous principal here, Jenny Myers, their school-based police officer was going to become a detective. And so I was thinking about a job swap, and went to them and said, I've got this crazy idea, taking kids out bush. I think it'd be a program that really would be interesting. If I went to this school, do you think that would be something I could try? And the principal was supportive, and so that all started from there. This year we've combined that program, which was sort of my brainchild, with a registered training organisation, Paramount Adventure Centre in the Gold Coast. So by partnering up with them and a local not-for-profit called Wild Projects, the three of us are sort of basically putting all our skills and resources together and bringing it out of there.
You must be so proud to think that the idea, it's changing lives.
Yeah, hopefully. That's the idea. It's always been, I guess, just a passion project of mine, but I think the proof is in the pudding. You know, the University of Queensland's looking into it in evaluations, and it's showing that, you know, if you do that with kids, they get something out of it. It's positive. It also, I guess, as a police officer, I've got tools in my toolbox on how to help people, and the biggest tool we've got is punishment. And I think, well, I need more tools in my toolbox than that. How about, you know, reward and mentoring and collaborative relationships and that kind of thing? That gives me a more solid toolbox and a big hammer to hit people with. That's the way I look at it.
This is like the most incredible thing I've ever done in my life, and I'm honestly so happy to say that I made it into this group. And these kids, like everyone in this group, are the most amazing people I've ever spent time with.
And then hooks on either side of these things.
Amazing. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, I won't share my screen again because we're just going to show the what actually happened at Cape York. So I just want to talk briefly about that, and then we'll go straight into that video. It was a cracking trip. It took a lot to put together. It's about a 4,000 kilometre round trip when we came back, and so you can imagine the logistics of such an exercise and making sure risk is managed appropriately. It takes a lot. So I did have my inspector come in and say, Mark, is it worth it? Like, why are we taking the kids on this trip and this experience? And I said, well, I know the risk literature inside out, and one of the things you should look at is substitution. I said, look, I can't substitute it for anything else. I can't give them an experience like I can up in Cape York. And she went, okay, better not go wrong then. And so I took him up there, and yeah, it was just a remarkable trip. Just a quick plug: the Laura Aboriginal Dance Festival is on again next year. It runs every 2 years, and so if you ever want, and Laura is now bitumened all the way, so you can take a 2-wheel drive up there. So if anyone's interested in it, I cannot recommend it highly enough. And in fact, I'm seriously in planning and talks to do it again next year. So I'm just going to show you.
You said, Mark, you called me after this trip, and you said that you even danced, and you're not a dancer.
Yes, yeah, they got me dancing. I danced during the festival. I got out in the Bora ground. They invited all the public in, and everyone danced. That was pretty cool. And then at night time, Yothu Yindi were playing. They had a concert, so we played dance to Yothu Yindi till 11 o'clock at night. So yeah, cracking trip. So I'll show you this. You'll see a lot of that in the trip, and yeah, let's go.
Cool.
The advice that I would give another young person thinking about joining Walk of Life program is, it doesn't matter if you've got anxiety or insecurities. Doing this will make you happy, feel accomplished. So go ahead, even if you're scared, do it. Because the moment you've done it, you'll feel happy and glad that you did it and not afraid, because you'll learn that you can overcome your fears, your insecurities, your anxieties, and when you do, you'll feel a whole lot better, because that's what I felt like when I finished doing this.
I get instant regret. The time spent living with you in my head. I made my bed, and it's no bed. There's still life in this girl, yeah.
This has been a trip of a dream time because I've made new friends, I've experienced things that I never thought I would, and I've went places that I would have never been able to go.
You think it's dumb, waiting for the words to come.
And the advice I would give for any other younger people that want to join this trip is do it. Don't be afraid of anything, and like just go for it. Like it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. Like
I'll bypass the park, picking up pieces of asphalt, the soles of my toes hit the tar.
I learned a lot more of my culture and it just helped me get more sight on all the things that happen to the Aboriginals, especially with cooks in both sides of the story now.
I know why I'm stuck on the north side.
This has been the trip of a dream time because it's like all the experiences we've done, like going to see the rock art, dance festival, and all the other stuff. There's so much we've done in this like 12 days. It's just like something not everyone can do in their time.
So make it, I'll check it, say the words now then.
I've gotten to experience things that I've never thought I'd really be able to experience in my lifetime. And like I've gotten to see so many beautiful places. Like if it wasn't for this trip, I would never have been like thought of coming to the Laura Dance Festival, like ever coming up this far in Australia.
The memories that will stick with me from this trip is definitely the fact that you don't have to be blood to be family. Over the 12 days that we've been together, like these 13 people have really brought me together and helped me think about the importance of having people in your life and remember that you're not alone and stuff.
Remember, stronger than we seem, smarter than we think, stronger than we believe, braver than we believe.
That video never gets old, Mark.
Yeah, I've watched it many times and never get sick of it, to be honest.
Wish I could have gone there.
Next year, Will.
Next year we'll be there.
Let me just go back to. Okay, so that gives you an idea of just one trip we did last year, and it certainly was the biggest trip. I'm going on another one next week with this group this year. We're going to go to Humpy Island, which is an island off the Great Barrier Reef near Keppel Group. So I guess gives you some idea, and I always love the joy in the kids' voices, and I guess that's what really counts. And I'll talk a little bit about feedback-informed treatment towards the end of this. But I was never comfortable with this idea of imposing your will on someone. This idea of boot camps and scared straight programs, and I don't know what it is. I could give the answer now why I don't like those, because I've done a lot of research and I can, but I'd be parodying that research. But it was always sort of instinctive in me to avoid that sort of thing, and to try to get it so that the enthusiasm is just bubbling up from the kids. And once you get that, like, your job is done. You've got the ability to really sort of get through to them much more than you would as a police officer, where you sit down and say, don't steal, you should turn up to school, don't truant. That gets pretty old pretty fast. And it's only when you can sort of get there and start talking about the real stuff underneath that surface behavior that you really get that sort of payoff. So this slide here is when that radio interview went to air, and they put it on their Facebook page, the ABC Wide Bay, which is for those overseas, that's our government radio station or government-owned radio station. So I went up there, and to my surprise, a bunch of kids chimed in from 2015. So this was last year. 2015 was the first time I ran the program, and it was actually the second program I ran that year. I ran 4 throughout that year. And so you just have a look through that those comments when people saying, "Remember when we did this? It was 6 years ago today. We came home and it was awesome. It was the best thing I ever did at high school." And it was really super cool because it was spontaneous. It wasn't, let's put a survey in front of kids to get some qualitative data, which I'm not knocking. I've done it, and I think it's important to get some research points, some evidence-based research behind it. But this was sort of, I guess, the even more important because it wasn't. I wasn't pushing the kids to do this. They just sort of made all these really strong comments about it and talked about how their lives were going. I hadn't seen these kids in 4 or 5 years. And so it was super great. So it may surprise you that police are doing this, and I guess I'm the only one doing exactly this, but police in general, more generally, especially the Queensland Police, have always been involved in youth development in this state. On the left there, that little black and white photo is a centre that was set up where they did a lot of boxing and judo, just a sports centre called the Lang Park Police Youth Centre. Now they set that up in that picture was taken, I think, 1951. They sent that up in the late 1940s after World War II, when they saw a lot of kids who no longer had parents. Parents, particularly dads, died in the war. And police recognised that, saw it as a problem, and decided to set up an idea where they would come and the police would be there and they could do some mentoring and work. So Queensland Police Service, I think, have been ahead of the curve with regards to youth development. And I see this as just adding, I hope, to that legacy. School-based policing has been a thing since the early 1990s. So, we've been around for 30, 40 years. And I don't think, certainly didn't start in Queensland. I think we stole a lot of the Canadians and the New Zealanders. And so there are good ideas out there. The idea of more collaborative engagement with the community rather than sort of this top-down finger-wagging approach. Let's skip that. That's just me dehydrating food with a bunch of kids. It also reduces my operational costs too, but it gives them a lot of self-achievement. I'm going to skip through fairly quickly with these things. This is just when I was putting this together, I kept thinking of what a traditional police youth program was and why I wanted to be different from that. Avoid this sort of static controlled environment. I wanted to be a lot more collaborative than that. I wanted to teach kids skills and get them to build their skills rather than just give them an experience. I didn't want to sort of have this idea that kids need to be fixed up so they can be responsible citizens. I had more the idea that, well, one, that sort of gives you a bias towards crime prevention and kids that might commit crime. And I was more broad, thinking I wanted to do crime prevention and child protection. There are kids that aren't committing crimes, but my goodness, they needed protection. And so all kids needed opportunities for development. And the best way so I just didn't want to see a broken kid that needs to be fixed, which fixates on behavior. I wanted to see a bunch of kids that need opportunities to develop themselves, which includes behavior, but includes their own well-being and a lot of other things. It was always a fairly simple program. And the other thing I wanted to do is I love working within these government systems. And I am the first person to criticise government systems, whether it be police or school. But I also know that I'm a police officer. I work in a school, and that is going to be, apart from their family, which is by far the most biggest influence in a child's life. This is probably the second and third tier influence in a child's life. And by working within those systems, I automatically do things like maintain feedback after a child has had a good experience. So it's not like take a child on a camp or some sort of program, end a program, they never see their mentor again. These kids saw me, like the ones in 2015, for example, they saw me for the next couple of years until they graduated in grade 12. And so constantly I would have this group of kids in the school who I would be able to go talk to, and they would know me. They'd gone on camps with me. They knew what I was doing. And it was just really good feedback and follow up that was just automatic because I worked within those systems rather than coming in as an outsider into that system, which sometimes is necessary, don't get me wrong, but it's a tremendous advantage. All right, so that's a basic program. Like I said, I then last year and this year added a Cert 2 into it. One of the other advantages of that was that it tapped into an income stream. So the state government gives registered training organisations a allocated income if a child can be taught a certificate in high school. And so I just went to the RTO and said, how about I split that money with you and we'll split some of the costs. So now I have a income stream that isn't relying on grants, which was another thing I think is in that list back there. I see programs that run on a grant and the program runs for a year or two and then the money runs out for the grant and it's too hard to rewriting grants when you're in the middle of the program. So the program falls over until someone can run another grant and get another lot of money. So I now have sort of continuity, a sustainable program that I can run for the next 10 years, which is when I'm going to retire. And then I'll have to do it voluntarily. The other thing is I designed the actual certificate too to give the maximum employment pathways to these kids. And so, for example, I put 2 food safety units in there, which help out in the hospitality industry, which is a great employer of young people. So those 2 food units form what's called a food safety supervisor's skill set. And so if you add a $30 RSA card so that they can work in a licensed premises, they can work in any commercial kitchen in the country. Then I've got things like workplace health and safety and provide first aid. If you have a white card, which allows you to work in construction sites, again, it's a $30 online course. Those skills are really useful for the construction industry. And then I've got obviously the sport and rec industry, which is a lot of overlap with the outdoor recreation. And then of course I've got all the hard skills. We do bushwalking, navigation, canoeing, stand-up paddleboarding, indoor rock climbing, for all the outdoor education tourism stuff. And then we do a lot of minimize environmental impact. That's another unit that's in this thing to give them an idea of environmental awareness. Not listed here, these are the mandatory units, or sorry, the 4 mandatory and the elective units I've chosen. But I added another unit to this last year when we went to Cape York. So that did a unit on Indigenous knowledge and sharing Indigenous knowledge. So I just wanted to give them as broad a scope as possible so that I'm giving them this sort of multi-skilled discipline that they can apply to any career path or any even life path that they choose. Worked with, I met Will DeBud at an ABAC conference a number of years ago, and he talked about outcome ratings and monitoring outcome data, and that was a fortuitous meeting. In fact, I got a bit of a confession to make, and I've never told Will this story, but so I sat in this little dingy classroom. It smelled like mold in this Candlebark school down in Melbourne, and I just happened to pick his it was like there was a number of presentations you could go to, and I picked Will's out because it was talking about evaluation. I think I saw the word evaluation in his title, and I was thinking I should evaluate my program, see if it's doing any good. So I went to that for that reason, and then sort of opened up this whole new field of outcome ratings. And then afterwards, I saw him approaching the lunch line and adjusted my course so I'd get to the lunch line at the same time, so I could sort of have a talk to him about that and pick his brain about this idea of outcome data and why that's important. And I've been picking his brain ever since. So it was a very fortuitous lunch meeting after his course. So I take a lot of qualitative data from the students before and after, see if their scores are raised, see if my scores, because they also evaluate me, and see if my scores are getting better or worse. And if they're not, what can I do to change that? I adjust the program to suit. And that also gives you an idea of effect sizes, which is I guess is one way to sort of test yourself against a benchmark, because I think there's you can never rest on your laurels. And I've always been keen to, especially because I'm a newcomer at this sort of outdoor education sort of stuff. I'm an old hand at child protection, but I've sort of adapted that skill into a new field, and there's so much more to learn. So just a quick example of the value of feedback. So this year I found one student who was super challenging. In fact, I remember a phone call to Will at the start of the year saying, man, I don't know if I can do anything with this one. And so the first few days, very difficult in a classroom, lots of interruptions. I knew that was coming because he had actually been referred to me from the school. And that's something I probably should have mentioned before. Sometimes I get volunteers sometimes I'll go out and target kids and encourage them to come into the program. And sometimes the school asks me to bring a kid into the program. This kid was one of that third group. So I gave them their outcome rating scale and their session rating scale. And on the session rating scale, I received a 3 out of 10 for listening. Now, that was actually pretty fair. I didn't get my back up about him giving me a 3 because I was struggling listening to him. In fact, I thought I'd do nothing but listen to him because he'd never be quiet. So, but I thought, that's a fair comment, but I don't want to be a 3 out of 10 listening to this kid. He's not feeling listened to. That's more important than the fact that than what I feel. So I went and had a bit of a chat to him about, program and what he's hoping about it. He's an Indigenous lad. He really likes the outdoors, like camping, meat and drink to him. Like he loves it. Fishing, big thing on him. And discovered he didn't know much about bush tucker, but he's really interested in that. So the next lesson, like the very next morning after getting this scale, I was going to do something different, but I thought, no, for the next hour and a half, we've been in the classroom, we've started well, let's go outside. So we went outside and I gave him a bit of an impromptu bush tucker tour. It's something that I've sort of studied all my life and got the opportunity to learn more about when I was at Cape York, and we go walks on country with traditional owners who I'd get to know up there. And so I literally just walked outside the PCYC and said, look, see that? That's lamander. It's been planted there because it's a good landscape plant. But lamander is actually, there's bits of it that are edible. You can grind up the seeds. You can eat the green shoots, the leaves. And then the leaves have got this strap-like appearance, which is super tough, which is great for weaving, for making bush cord string. And then I went over, there was some Moreton Bay figs just across the road. So we went over there and talked about Moreton Bay figs and how that's a, edible plant. And the uses you can make string out of the inner bark, and showed them how to do that. Just literally just walked around and talked a bit about the weeds that grow there. A lot of the weeds that are just grown out of the garden, edible. If you want to learn about bush tucker that will actually save your life one day, learn about weeds. Anyway, so he was just, and suddenly he listened to me for an hour and a half. Like I couldn't get him before to listen to me for 3 minutes. And he was just there asking questions, and you could see him taking notes, and it was super cool. And so at the end of the week, another session rating scale, I think it got up to about 6 or 7. And obviously I'd like a 9 or 10, but I thought that's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. So this idea of using outcome data, which I'd never heard of it before I spoke to Will, but it's tremendously important, and it's really affected the way I one of the value adds to my program. Now, I don't want to pretend this is perfection. Like I think I've got a line down there. If this kid wants to go to the ball, he needs a fairy godmother. He can't use me because I'm still not good enough to, his behavior's still not 100%. Here he is here. But the point being that outcome monitoring can change the way you innovate with a client. And it's, I couldn't do without it. It's a wonderful thing. Actually, Will's got a really good project on at the moment about outcome data. So you should tell him about the Atom project when you get a chance.
Okay.
So here's just a bunch of boring graphs that showing that the kids' data is better. They're considering, one of the things I really like is that they consider it's changing their attitude towards police. And we found that actually kids that we didn't deem at risk, it didn't change their attitudes to police very much, but kids that were deemed at risk, it did change their attitudes toward police, which is really good. They really like the preparation activities that went into it. The idea of not just giving them experience, but sharing an experience with these kids was really good. And they overwhelmingly granted it a positive experience. We asked that question 2 ways. Is this positive? Is it negative? Nobody said it was negative. In the positive side, everyone said it was positive, just to sort of double check those findings. So we're finding really good benefits out of it. The other thing, and this goes back to feedback informed treatment, is a lot of the adjustments on the course that I made were as a result of the evaluation that pointed out shortcomings in the program. And then instead of getting my back up or say, well, that's just the way it is, trying to figure out how to address what I thought was very constructive criticism. So these are professionals' perceptions that have been on the program over the last 7 years that the University of Queensland has interviewed. And a lot of it was things about, the next slide I want, there you go, is the idea of the schools won't want to take time away from the curriculum. I think that's a bit of a challenge. The idea of money, this program was subsidised. Children didn't miss out because they can afford it. That was great. Ran on borrowed equipment, so it was cheap. That was great. But how do you make that long-term work. And I took those criticisms to heart and thought, they're 100% right. What can I do? And again, over the last 2 years, I've changed the program into more of a certificate to accredited program to address that curriculum problem, because now I write according to school curricula and the kids get QCE points, which they would be, the school would be reluctant to release kids for a program because they're missing out on QCE point time. If the program incorporates QCE points, the school is begging you to take the kids. And then I've already talked about the money, how I address that problem by tapping into an income stream, which is the state training money. So again, goes back to feedback informed treatment. I call it, it's sort of like feedback informed education, or feedback informed program in general. Everything is feedback informed. I get feedback from the leaders, feedback from the kids, and then I adjust programs to suit. I think there's still a version 3 in my back pocket. I don't think the program's, I've always felt that it was sort of 50% of what it could be. And then I made a change last year, and now I think it's sort of 70 to 80. I really want to get some. I've got kids that are begging me to do a Cert 3 now. And that's weird because of those kids, 3 of them have either been kicked out of school or have left school of their own accord. So the school's saying, we can't do anything with them, can't educate them. And they're coming to me saying, Mark, we want to do a Cert 3. Can we get more education, please? Which tells you something's off, but it's good. And so I'm trying to work out how to give these kids a Cert 3. A Cert 3 is about $3,000 or $4,000 if you're going to have a fee for service model. So I'm approaching different employers and trying to work out the idea of, say, a traineeship or a school-based traineeship where the kids get paid to learn. I think that can work, but that's going to take a lot of work. So that's my focus at the moment for the rest of the year, to trying to get that work next year. Because I brought a lot of those senior kids back as mentors to the juniors, and that's worked really well as well. Okay, so just to sum up, a couple of things that I've learned over the time that I've been doing this. And like I said, this is a combination of almost 25 years of policing experience and 7 years of running sort of an outdoor adventure therapy program. And one is that I couldn't have done this without collaborative partnerships, like Will with CSU, Department of Education. Who else have I got in there? A lot of traditional owners, both individual traditional owners and land corporations. I've worked a lot with rangers and park rangers. I'm missing a bunch. And then private businesses, obviously the Registered Trade Organisation, Domino's Pizza, I've got a mate in there who often kicks in free pizzas. So all these are just partnerships that I've pulled in. And that is so much harder than I ever thought it would be. I thought it would be super easy in my naivety 7-8 years ago. I thought, hey, I want to work with kids. Everyone on board? And I was thought everyone would go, yeah, of course we are. You want to work with kids? Who doesn't want to work with kids? But everyone's got their own agenda and everyone has different priorities. And so it's harder, but it's far more satisfying, and you get so much more out of things if you work with people. Research into your program's efficacy is super important. You've got to just not rely on your own opinion, but you've got to sort of tap into evidence-based and make sure that your opinion is backed up by solid evidence. And if the evidence is contradicting your opinion, you're just going to have to change your damn opinion. I've had to do that many times, and I expect to do that many times over the next few years. Always incorporate the student's voice. Sorry?
Real quick, Mark. One of the things with the outcome data that we did with this program, and I put links down there for anyone that's interested, is one of the things we did is we took a method of a clinical tool that's also an outcome tool, so that when things were off during an adventure or during a week of school, Mark could fix it. So some of the things of what we do is we only measure to support adventure therapy. So we go, when are we finally going to prove that adventure therapy works? And then you get to the end of an expedition, you give the person some measure again, they fill it out, no impact. And you go, well, shit, that sucks. But if we knew halfway that there was no impact, then you can talk to the young person and go, yeah, and here's how we address that. So it moves beyond just thinking of adventure therapy. And that full year of programming, and granted, this is a smaller sample size, but still nothing to shake your fist at, is for the past 50 years, psychotherapy has had an effect size of 0.8 to 1.2. Adventure therapy falls into that as well. And one of the things with Mark's, that 1 year of programming was above, the outcomes were above those from tightly controlled, manualized clinical trials. So when we're talking about all these outcomes that are on the table, we have improved well-being, improved relationship with the police, improved relationship with an person of authority figure, improved school engagement, improved employability. So it's very unique. And we're also achieving outcomes. Well, not me. Mark is achieving outcomes above tightly controlled clinical trials. So the baseline for psychotherapy outcomes internationally are we're on par with that and slightly above average. Now that will go down a little bit as we get more clients through the program for sure. But I think that's such an important thing to note when we think about this, the outcome data as well, to inform our practice and to help us to change and adapt. Keep going, Mark.
No worries. I've got in there study like hell. Like I said, especially if you're a newbie like me. So attend conferences, read research, test theories, network, talk to a lot of people smarter than you. I stand on the shoulders of giants and don't mind admitting it when it comes to everything that I do. And then basically just treat kids as the way you'd like to be treated. And, you know, the golden rule has been around for a long time for a very good reason. So I just want to finish up just with a bit of a dream that I've got, because you can sort of get an idea of how many different organizations and agencies have got involved, either deliberately through me reaching out to them, or I guess I've just come across them and pulled them in through the program. And so I just want to finish off with just a little bit of a story from this year from my group. So I just want you to imagine a girl who was born in an Indigenous community. And this girl had a mother who was unfortunately heavily addicted to amphetamines, had her own mental health problems, to the point where she couldn't look after this her child anymore alone. So they moved back to live with their grandmother. And so when this child was about 5 or 6, she heard her grandmother screaming from another room, and she went in there to find that her mother had taken her own life, had decided that life was too painful, and had taken a rope and hung herself. And together, her and her grandmother cut her down and waited for the authorities to arrive and take her mother's body away. And imagine that was the first of many interactions with authorities, either school, with teachers, or with police, other authority figures that she had in her life, that for the next 10 years of her life were nothing but horrific experiences, or experiences that came along and coincided with her horrific experience. So it's easy to conflate the two. And so imagine that with a child with this sort of trauma and background, that she was to have a big fight in a school, and the school then responds to that big fight by expelling the child and calling the police because she assaulted another student. Now, this is a fairly common tale, but I wanted to sort of dream about what would happen if everyone started working maybe a little bit more collaboratively. Because imagine if the police officer, instead of just sending her to court and starting on a pipeline into jail, sat down with her, maybe with her grandmother, her guardian, and interviewed her in her house around the kitchen table, and spoke about different ways and better ways of doing things, and using some sort of alternative like a caution or a restorative justice conference to deal with the criminal side of things. But also the police officer had some connections with the schools, and although she was expelled from one school, the new school that she was going to go into was willing to free her up to attend a program that gave her QCE points, which they were struggling with because she missed so much school. And so imagine that as this child goes through this program, she starts realizing that she's actually going to get the same QCE points she would have if she had stayed in school. But even more importantly, she was discovering some really untapped talents, extremely physically gifted, to the point where the Queensland Reds rugby union team had looked at scouting her out for one of their junior programs, has a really strong knowledge of her culture, and was very interested to find out that in this program, her culture was spoken of in a very respectful way, a very understanding way, that her culture was treated as a rich legacy, rather than something that was just completely separate and to be ashamed of from more mainstream culture, shall we say. And imagine that in doing so, she was able to have conversations about the importance of, where our behavior comes from and the importance of understanding trauma's role in affecting our minds and affecting the things that happen to us. So I just want you to sort of imagine that this is possible by different agencies working together and all addressing a child's needs, not box ticking or doing the bare minimum when people work together. And I guess I say it's a dream of mine, but in many ways it was the reality from this year, because that's exactly what happened this year with one of the kids in my program. It's one of the things that can happen if we work together. If we don't look at our discrete little units of psychologists and social workers, or police versus social workers, or education versus vocational training, and we put all these things in boxes, but when we all work it together, amazing things happen. And I've seen that, and in the past, and I know it's a possibility in the future. But it requires a lot of effort, like I said, a lot more than I thought, to try to collaborate with other people, often people who have different priorities and ideals than you, but to sort of find a compromise and common ground. And surely if any common ground can be found, it's kids, especially kids with severe complex trauma, have needs that need to be addressed by our society today. So let's dare to dream in that way. And that's certainly my dream, and I'm happy to share that dream with anyone else. And just like to thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Mark. Really appreciate you coming out. We probably, unfortunately, don't have too much time for questions as we all use the hour. But if you want to put your email in the chat box, is that okay if people reach out to you and chat with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. And awesome. Well, thank you so much, everybody, and have a wonderful Thursday, or if it's Wednesday, if you're somewhere else. Thanks so much, Mark. I'll see you later.
Thanks, Will. Thank you, everybody.